From our studios in Los Angeles, here is Maria Shriver.
They say no good deed goes unpunished. That may not always be true, but it certainly was in the story you're about to see. A family man who only wanted to help ended up hurt, badly hurt, his life in tatters, his finances in ruins, accused of a horrendous crime. You probably think such a thing could never happen to you. So did he. Here's Keith Morrison.
The Lord be with you.
David Cathcart was always an active Christian, a man with a profound belief in God and the Catholic Church.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
And this is where his story begins, in the church.
It's always been a foundation in our family, stronghold, keep us together.
Jeff Cathcart is the eldest of David's 4 sons, and he's found himself leading his family in the battle of their lifetimes to clear their father's good name, which would be, as you will see, not such an easy thing to do, especially given what he was accused of. Accusations that just didn't fit the kind of man David Cathcart seemed to be. A loving father of 4 sons, a leader in the Boy Scouts, a successful businessman in Orange County, California. Life was good for the Cathcart family, and because of that, Jeff says, their father always taught him and his brothers to be charitable.
There every Sunday, always the first one to volunteer. My dad never wanted to be in the limelight in the front. He liked to be in the back, doing the cooking, doing the cleaning, help organize. He got great satisfaction from that.
And so, when David heard about a Christian orphanage in Ensenada, Mexico that needed help, he volunteered. And this became David's all-consuming passion. La Puerta de Fe, or the Door of Faith. It had been founded and run by an American couple for 30 years, and then time caught up. The husband died. His widow moved back to the States, and the orphanage's daily operation was left to their assistant, a man named Gabriel Diego Garcia. Once the founders left, funding began to dry up, and La Puerta de Fe began to fall apart. And that's the unhappy situation David Cathcart discovered in Ensenada, Mexico.
My dad went down and saw what was going on, saw the horrible condition that these kids were living in. Buildings with no doors, no windows, no beds, clothes that weren't clean.
David's charity, presence, and help were welcomed by Diego. And so whenever they could, David and his then-wife would drive the 3 hours south to lend a hand. They sponsored the kids in school. David cut their hair like he once did for his own sons. They persuaded friends and church members and strangers to give what they could, and they did. Soon, new windows, walls, and roofs were built for the orphanage. Food, clothes, money began pouring in, and the orphanage began to look presentable again.
There wasn't a door that my dad wouldn't go knock on to ask for help for these kids.
He was pretty committed.
Yeah, wanted to make a difference. They raised a substantial amount of money for this orphanage in a short period of time. Within 5 months, they raised close to $100,000.
That's a lot of money.
And you can imagine how far that kind of money would go in Mexico.
Eventually, world-famous movie stars would attend gala fundraising parties for the orphanage, like this one, with Raquel Welch, which raised $50,000 in one night. Because so much money was coming in, David set up a non-profit organization in the name of the orphanage, the Door of Faith. He would be the president.
David says the charity's accounting rules were to be satisfied with a simple arrangement. David raised the money and gave it to Diego, and in return, Diego would provide receipts showing how the money was used to care for the children. Simple. Except, says David, for all the money he sent down here, no receipts came back.
Was he afraid the director of the orphanage had become corrupt?
Yes, he was stealing money.
His father's suspicions grew stronger, Jeff says, after Diego sent David 2 sets of accounting books, in which the numbers simply didn't match. Finally, David felt he had no choice. He drove down to Ensenada and gave Diego an ultimatum: account for the discrepancies, or face the Mexican authorities on charges of embezzlement. The reaction was swift.
When he brought that up, he was escorted off the orphanage and told never to come back.
I wonder how that was for him. after all he had done?
Slap in the face would be thank you for raising the money, now give it to me and leave.
Back home in California, David Cathcart decided to tell the officers of the nonprofit foundation he had set up about his suspicions. But before he could, he got an extraordinary telephone call from Diego's orphanage, and that changed everything.
They called him and said a boy had fallen and gotten hurt, and they need my dad to come up there with some money to help take him to the hospital and pay for it.
David didn't hesitate a moment. He rushed to his car and drove directly to the hospital. And there to meet him? No one from the orphanage. Only the Federales, Mexican police.
He was thrown against a wall with machine guns to his head, and his picture was taken and put on the front page of the newspapers in Mexico. Charged with child molestation.
Child molestation? David Cathcart, father of 4, pillar of his community, fundraiser extraordinaire, charged with sexually abusing 4 young boys at the orphanage he worked for 3.5 years to improve. Impossible, his sons thought. Before this, there had never been even a whisper about inappropriate behavior when it came to David Cathcart.
And you thought, had to be something wrong.
Impossible. Impossible. There's no way.
Given the seriousness of the charge, there was no question of bail. David would have to remain in jail until his case was resolved. This is where he was taken. Ojos Negros, black eyes. Even the name of the place sounds nightmarish. In a crowded prison in a foreign land, among men whose language he barely understood or spoke, governed by a legal system much different from his own, David learned about an entirely new way for human beings to exist.
Prisoners here have what they come in with. There's no bed, no blanket, no toilet paper, no toothbrush, unless it's provided by someone on the outside. And then there's the danger of living here branded as a child molester.
The first 8 or 9 months, the family was told that if we wanted to see my dad alive or if we wanted to take care of him, that we would have to keep him in what we call solitary confinement, or in an enclosure, kept away from the main population, because people were going to try and hurt my father.
How was it for him?
Very hard. He had 100 questions for us every time we showed up. What's going on? Who's helping? Why aren't I out of here? And we had no answers.
David's children became very familiar with a 3-hour drive from Southern California to Ensenada, Mexico, where they tried to do everything they possibly could to free their father.
We didn't know who to turn to, where to turn to. Asked friends, asked anybody that would know anything about Mexico to help us, and to no avail.
But without speaking the language or understanding the Mexican judicial system, David's sons felt helpless, overwhelmed. David's family hired a lawyer in Mexico, thinking surely this was all a huge mistake and would be quickly corrected.
Were they the only witnesses against your father?
Yes. And all 4 of these boys' stories were exactly the same, verbatim, word for word, same place it happened, same time it happened.
Somebody had molested them.
Yes, but not my father. They lied. They were told to lie.
By whom?
By Gabriel Diego.
David told his family that Gabriel Diego Garcia, the man who had taken over the orphanage, the man he had threatened to report to the authorities for suspicious accounting, must have forced the boys to lie about being molested to shut him up.
It's a story that longtime orphanage worker Isabel Chavela believes is true.
Amor a los niños le tienen los americanos.
The ones who have love for the children are the Americans, because they are the ones who take them food and clothes. They send them the money, but they don't see what is going on at the orphanage.
And Chavela says it was David Cathcart, and not Diego, who fed the children and cured them of head lice and foot fungus.
A todos traía ropa, medicinas.
He brought clothes, medicine, food, and everything.
Él los cuidaba, los bañaba.
He would care for them.
A eso se dedicaba era.
Diego would dedicate himself to punishing the children, to hit them.
On top of all that, Chavela says, David never behaved strangely at the orphanage.
Él llegaba de día,
He came during the day like he always did. He never hid from anyone, and we never noticed anything wrong. We would say to each other, how could he have raped those kids if we never saw anything? There were always workers around there.
Like David's family, Chavela says she and many other workers at the orphanage believed David was being set up.
Él tuvo a los niños encerrados como una semana.
Diego had the children locked up for like 1 week, as if he was counseling them. He had them in the office. And when that happened, I asked the children if David had really molested them. And they would say, no, no, Chava, not me, not me. So later I was surprised that they were taking the children to point out David and say he did molest them.
Él se inventó toda la historia y los
Diego made up the whole story.
Why would they be saying these things about you?
I don't know why. Why I want to send him over there. Why?
Could it be because he saw some discrepancies in the books?
In the books?
The accounting?
It's no nothing about.
He became suspicious.
No, it's not true.
That's not true?
we never have a lot of money right here.
He believes he was set up.
No.
That you called and said, you know, one of the kids was in an accident. Come and see.
I called. It's a lie, this thing. I never called him.
And you never told any child to report that they'd been abused by David Cathcart?
No. I told the boys only to say the truth when the district attorney called there.
Somebody has to be lying, though. Who lied?
I'm pretty sure I no lie in the beginning and right to this moment.
During his trial, David Cathcart was brought into a courtroom like this one. He would stand shackled behind bars, understanding little of the proceedings, which were all held in Spanish. There would be no jury, only a judge to decide his fate. David's case would drag on for 9 long months. In the end, court records show, the testimony of the boys and not independent evidence was the deciding factor.
These attorneys never presented the evidence that we brought to them, spent thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to show that he's innocent, to no avail.
3 weeks before David Cathcart's 53rd birthday, a judge found David guilty of molesting 4 boys at the orphanage that welcomed and trusted him with their children. It did not seem unreasonable to the court to sentence him to 12 years in Ojos Negros, which is where, almost 7 long years later, we encountered David Cathcart. When we met him, David Cathcart still had 5 years left in his 12-year prison sentence. He was now living in secured quarters, away from the general prison population. He had become fluent in Spanish, counseled drug addicts, and was the prison's unofficial barber.
I was president of the board of directors. I had an obligation to the people that contributed money, to be honest, and to see that the money was being spent for the children, for their benefit, for their welfare.
But even after all that time, he swore he was innocent, that the boys, under duress from orphanage director Gabriel Diego, were forced to lie because he discovered huge discrepancies in Diego's bookkeeping.
I was set up by somebody who didn't like me, by somebody who had influence in the judicial system here.
What were your thoughts about home and family?
In the beginning, it was all the time. But when you're in a situation, you have to learn to control your mind and to keep busy, keep occupied, and keep your mind off of things that hurt.
If you hadn't, what would it have done?
Question my sanity.
It's hard to think about these things even now.
Over the 7 years, David's family fought relentlessly to free him from jail. They wrote hundreds of impassioned letters to lawmakers and the American embassy to no avail. They went through 9 lawyers and $500,000.
So you've all got into debt?
Absolutely. We've all lost a lot. Not just financial. You know, that's something that, that's just material stuff. That doesn't matter.
He's missed a lot, your father has. You've missed a lot.
During all of those days and months and years, 2 of David's sons were married. 6 grandchildren were born. and David's father died. And then, just about the time everyone assumed nothing more could be done, something, or someone, happened.
I have no doubt that several of the attorneys that they hired before they came to me, that there were reasons that they didn't do a good job.
This man is Bill Bollard. He is the American half of the Mexican-American legal team that takes on difficult cross-border cases, though for Bollard, this case was more difficult than most.
I'm the father of 5 sons, and I've never represented a child molester, and it frankly made me nervous. And so I told them after hearing this incredible story that I'd have to go down and meet him for myself, spend some time with him before I could determine whether it's something I wanted to get involved with. You're going to receive another notice.
But after he met David in prison, after he reviewed the case, Bollard says he and his partner became convinced David was innocent.
He told the story. It was very consistent with what his children had told me, but it was in a lot of detail. I never had the impression that he was manufacturing or looking for facts to tell me. It flowed as though it was something that he had lived with moment by moment, and I believed him.
And then, at Bollard's urging, someone else reviewed the case too. This woman, the judge. But Bollard says she was not an easy sell.
Judge Flores looked at us and said, "And what do you two want? What can you possibly tell me?" That was her attitude, that I haven't heard before. And we said, "Your Honor, we just want the opportunity to present the case one more time."
Here in Mexico, we do not have a lot of elements of proof, like medical tests, such as DNA, which should have been performed to find out if David Cathcart had molested the minors or not.
Judge Maria Flores had presided over 2 of David Cathcart's failed appeals. But on neither occasion, she says, did David's former attorneys provide a compelling defense. And, said Judge Flores, the records of the original trial show David's attorneys never cross-examined the boys, never put David on the stand to defend himself, and, most surprising, never allowed David to face his accusers.
David Cathcart's attorneys never asked for a confrontation. A confrontation means to have the person who's accusing you tell you to your face that you did this to me. His attorneys never asked for that.
I've learned long ago that I never hire an attorney from the locale. You never know. You never know who's beholden to whom in Mexico. You never know what the relationships are.
Favors are important back in the
Absolutely.
And Bollard quickly discovered the orphanage director, Gabriel Diego Garcia, who brought the molestation charges forward in the first place, had good friends in the local prosecutor's office.
You've spoken with Judge Flores. She's told me on more than one occasion that Diego is a dangerous man. His influence is wide, and he can pretty much do what he wants to do in Ensenada.
So where does a man like that get any power?
Where does a man like that have the ability to hire the former Attorney General for the state of Baja California as his personal attorney?
What does it take to hire that attorney?
Lots of money, lots of power.
¿No te gustan las cámaras?
But where does a man like Diego, who runs an orphanage on donations, get lots of money? The answer may lie in the hundreds of thousands of dollars sent by various churches and private individuals and gala fundraising events, like the one we told you about earlier, attended by movie stars Raquel Welch and Edward James Olmos. In that one evening alone, Diego and his board of directors raised $50,000 for the orphanage.
Given all that, Bollard and his partner knew the odds of freeing David Cathcart were slim, unless they could talk to the boys who accused him and prove they had lied. But how could Bollard and his partner find them? And what would they say after all these years? 3 of them were now adults and no longer living at the orphanage. The 4th was a minor still under Diego's care at the orphanage.
Fortunately, there had been a local newspaper reporter that from the beginning of the story had been following it. She had kept track of where the players were, where they were moving, and where they were by the time that we started looking for them.
So what would they say? We went looking for the boys ourselves, and with the help of that same reporter, we met one of David Cathcart's accusers.
His name is Ephraim. He was 15 when he swore in court that David molested him. Now 21, when we meet him, he is living on his own, but has never forgotten what happened at that orphanage.
Man nervios.
He is, he tells us, deeply afraid of what may happen if he speaks, and yet he feels he must.
You have known Gabriel all your life.
Yeah.
Does he scare you?
Yeah. His name scared me.
Why?
Because I know him for a long, long time, so.
Could he hurt you?
Who, sí?
Oh, yes.
Mucho.
Very much.
Ephraim told us Gabriel had a terrible temper and regularly beat him and the other orphans, many of whom were much younger than himself.
Simplemente de acordarme.
He hurt me a lot. Just thinking about it scares me. The way he used to beat us, threaten us.
With his hands?
No.
No, I wish. It would have been almost okay if the only thing he used were his hands. But he would use whatever he could find nearby, a big stick, a pipe.
It was Gabriel Diego and only him who beat the orphans, Ephraim told us. But still, what about that medical report that the boys had at some time in the past been sexually molested? We had to ask, could David have been responsible for that?
Tell me about David Cathcart. Was he abusing you too?
Who?
David Cathcart?
¿Que sí qué? ¿Abusó de mí? No, way, José, no. No.
Nunca te puso una mano encima, nunca te hizo nada.
No, he all the time tried to help, especially me.
Especially you?
Yeah, David. No, he tried to help me.
But you went to court and said that he was abusing you.
Yeah, but if I don't say that, Gabe kicked me. I have to do what Gabe said. Gabe told me, Diego, he told me, if I don't do that, they told me, you go out from the orphanage. If I don't say that, I go out, what I do outside?
He'd kick you out.
Yeah, and I don't have family outside, so I have to do whatever he said.
He frightened you that much?
Yeah, not only me, the other guys too.
What did he tell you to say?
He said I have to... Bueno, él me dijo que dijera que...
He told me to say that he raped me.
Raped?
Yep.
But you were not?
No, they've never touched me for do something like that.
One by one, 3 of the boys who had accused David of molesting them told Bollard the same remarkable story.
Each one of these boys said that Diego had regularly beaten them and physically abused them, and they were scared to death of him. And the last thing they wanted to do, now that they'd escaped that environment, is to make a new enemy of him, where he knows where they are and he knows how to find them.
They're saying to you, he's innocent, he didn't do this, but we're afraid to change our testimony.
Absolutely.
But what about the last boy, the one still living at the orphanage under Diego's care?
In order to have a child removed from an orphanage to come to court to do anything, you have to have permission from DEEF. We filed a petition with DEEF that he be permitted to leave the orphanage and come forward to testify.
DEEF, which is the equivalent of our Child Protective Services, denied the request, stopping Bollard and his partner in their tracks.
We were really scratching our heads as to how we were going to make this happen, because the judge was 3/4 persuaded that Dave was innocent, but there still remained 1/4 of doubt.
Remarkably, the last boy, Daniel Escamilla, heard about David's appeal and came forward on his own.
I was young, and I would say anything they told me to say. They say he raped us at the same time, but that was a lie. We made it up.
Daniel was only 9 years old when he first accused David of molesting him. He says because he was so young, he was afraid to tell the truth.
They made me feel really nervous because I knew the story wasn't true, but I was afraid they would do something to me. I thought they were going to do something to me. They were going to hit me.
But even though all the boys were now saying they lied, David's battle wasn't over yet. Judge Flores, who had already upheld David's 12-year sentence twice, would have to agree to preside over yet another hearing. She did. And she said she did because she was determined to find the truth. And what happened in that room, she told us, was astonishing.
Yo mandé traer al director.
Something important happened when I ordered Gabriel Diego Garcia to come to court. Each young man squared off in front of Gabriel and said, "You forced me to lie about Mr. Cathcart raping us." Gabriel, of course, denied it.
It must have taken a lot of courage for those boys to do that.
I could see that they were literally shaking as they faced Gabriel and said, "You beat me regularly in the orphanage. You made me lie about Mr. Cathcart, or you were going to throw me out into the streets." They were upset. But while they were shaking, I could see that they were actually relieved by their recanting.
Were you afraid of Gabriel when you changed your story?
Sí. Yes. Yo lo tenía que hacer porque. But I had to do it because I've never felt this bad before.
How do you feel now?
For the first time, I've got hope.
Hope? Yes, because finally, after that horrendous 7-year ordeal, Judge Flores declared David Cathcart innocent of all charges. His record would be wiped clean. As soon as the paperwork was done, he was free to go home. But that wasn't all. Judge Flores advised the prosecutor to begin an investigation of the Door of Faith Orphanage and Gabriel Diego Garcia.
As a judge, it's my sworn responsibility to bring the truth to light, and in this case, the truth came forward. Maybe it came late, but the truth was established.
There was one person who was very unhappy with the court result, Diego. And he left court that day with a vow, witnesses say, that David Cathcart would not win his freedom so easily.
Before his family could celebrate the affirmation of David's innocence, his freedom, anticipated for so long, out of the blue came something utterly shocking.
It is not restricted. Put the phone call through. It's very important.
Now there was something new
Don't cancel
and
the phone call.
dreadful, which could make it even worse.
I still have a drop of blood left. And they're not going to be satisfied till they get it.
3 days before David was set to be released on child molestation charges, he found himself back in court, this time for drug trafficking.
No comprende. Yes, I can. It is not restricted. Put the phone call through. It's very important.
David's family and attorneys were stunned. How could this happen?
We had such a feeling of, it would be like trying to climb Mount Everest and you're reaching the peak only to find you're climbing the wrong mountain. I mean, we just had a feeling, how can this be? We've not even heard of this before.
Mystified, Attorney Bollard rushed back to Mexico to meet with the federal prosecutor on the drug charges.
He said, yeah, what I have here are 2 sworn affidavits from prison guards that claim that back in 1998, they were searching your client's cell and they found heroin in his shirt pocket.
It's not very good for his credibility.
He had never formally been charged or accused of it. There had never, ever, prior to 3 days before his scheduled release, ever been a charge or a complaint filed with the federal court.
That was the first anybody had heard of it?
Absolutely. These guards resurrected, by memory, something which they claimed had happened 2 years ago and charged him for the first time.
Did Dave ever use drugs in prison?
Never. Dave has never used drugs. Anyone that knows him can tell you that.
But here was the cold fact of it. If David Cathcart was found guilty of drug trafficking, he'd face another 10 to 25 years behind bars. Bollard knew that to prevent that disaster, he was going to have to cross-examine those guards and somehow prove that they were lying.
The only evidence they had was what the 2 guards said happened. They set a court date for that day. The 2 guards didn't show up.
So where were they? After a scramble for information, Bollard discovered the guards had been given a 30-day vacation that very morning.
Prison guards don't have 30-day vacations. They may get a week off once in a while or 2 weeks if they've been there a long time, but a 30-day vacation, it's unheard of.
How is it possible they wouldn't have been at the hearing in the first place?
We suspect they were told not to go.
By whom?
Ultimately, by the same man that put our client in jail 6.5 years ago.
It looked as if David would remain in prison. And then, the judge overseeing the drug case, not Judge Flores, became suspicious, ordered the guards arrested and had them questioned. Not only did their stories not match, they changed several times.
If this is something that you're going to put a man away for possibly 25 years, you'd better get your story straight. And they couldn't even do that. Jeff?
Yeah.
Bill Bollard.
Bollard relayed the good news back to David's family in California.
We feel very confident that the federal court judge is moving this thing along. And
it wasn't quite over yet, though. First, the judge would have to rule in David's favor. In California, David's family held a candlelight vigil and prayed for the best.
Any day now, he could come home.
Any day.
Are you afraid to get your hopes up?
Absolutely. I've had my hopes up and down so many times I don't even think I can count and tell you.
7 long days and nights went by, and there was nothing, no word from the court. The official silence almost unbearable.
And then, on a moonless night when David didn't think he could take one more day of waiting, 2 guards came to his cell and told him he was free.
I was in my room sitting there, winding down at 10:30, and I get a telephone call. Dave is standing out in front of the jail. I thought at first it might be a trick, but I said, Dave, don't move, we'll be right there.
But it wasn't a trick. When Bollard and his partner arrived at the prison gates, David was there, speechless but smiling. They took this picture outside the gates, free at last.
I kept asking him, how do you feel? How do you feel? And he just said, I'm numb. I don't feel anything. I can't feel anything. I'm numb. I can't believe it yet. He couldn't believe he was out.
But thanks to Diego, it still wasn't finished. He and his attorneys were now accusing Bollard of bribing the boys to change their original testimony. They also accused Judge Flores of taking bribes.
Did you report the judge to a higher judicial authority?
Well, this is except my lawyers and my board. Yes.
The charges went all the way up to Mexico's Supreme Court, which ruled there was no evidence anyone took any bribes, and David Cathcart should never have spent a single day behind bars. He was completely vindicated. And that's how it came to be that on a beautiful summer day, David's sons and their families prepared the homecoming they thought would never happen. After 7 excruciating years, the nightmare was finally over. Now they let down their guard and gave in to joy.
Yeah, you can tear the house down, but you can't destroy the foundation.